But something about the way her small shoulders shook, the way airport security stood at a distance looking uncomfortable and uncertain, made his feet stop moving. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She wore a wrinkled purple dress that had seen better days, mismatched socks and sneakers with fraying laces. An airport employee crouched nearby, speaking in that practiced, overly gentle tone that adults use when they have no idea what they're doing. "Sweetie, we need you to tell us who you're traveling with," the woman said. Her smile strained with growing concern. The little girl only cried harder. Marcus should have walked away. He had his own problems. The job interview in Boston that could change everything. The student loans that kept him up at night. The tiny apartment he could barely afford. He was 28 years old, single, and could barely take care of himself, let alone get involved in whatever complicated situation this was. But then the girl looked up, and their eyes met for just a second. In that moment, Marcus saw something he recognized, the particular kind of fear that comes from being utterly alone in a world too big and too indifferent. Before his brain could catch up with his body, he was walking toward them. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling down to the girl's level. "My name's Marcus. What's yours?" The airport employee started to intervene, but something in Marcus's gentle approach made her pause. The little girl hiccuped, studying him with red-rimmed eyes that held far too much wariness for someone so young. "Emma," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Emma, can you tell me what's wrong? Are you lost?" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "My foster mom. She put me on the plane by myself. She said my new family would pick me up in Seattle, but nobody came. Nobody's here." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He knew that feeling. God, did he know that feeling. 20 years ago, he'd been a kid in the system, too. Bounced between homes, always waiting for someone who never came. He glanced at the airport employee who was now on her phone, likely calling Child Protective Services. Marcus knew what would happen next. Emma would be taken to a holding facility, processed through the system. Just another file, another case number. She'd spend the night in some strange place with strange people, feeling even more abandoned than she already did. "Listen," he said, an insane idea forming in his mind even as he spoke. "I know you're scared right now, but I promise you're not alone, okay?" Then he stood and turned to the employee, his heart pounding. "I'm her uncle," he said, the lie sliding off his tongue with surprising ease. "There was a miscommunication. I'm here to pick her up." The employee's eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. "Sir, we need to see identification, custody papers, documentation." "Of course," Marcus said, forcing his voice to stay level, even as panic clawed at his chest. What was he doing? This was crazy. This was illegal. This could ruin his life. "But can we handle this somewhere more private? She's already terrified and all these people staring." It was a gamble, appealing to the woman's compassion, but it worked. 5 minutes later, they were in a small office while the employee made phone calls, while Emma sat pressed against Marcus's side like he was a life raft in a storming sea. He should have come clean, should have admitted the truth. But every time he opened his mouth to confess, Emma's small hand would tighten on his jacket, and the words died in his throat. "The number we have on file for the placement agency isn't working," the employee said, frustration creeping into her voice. "And there's no uncle listed on her travel documents." Marcus's mind raced. "I'm her mother's brother. The placement might be through her father's side. Look, I have my ID right here." He pulled out his wallet. Knowing it proved nothing. Buying time he didn't have for a plan he didn't possess. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Emma, who had finally stopped crying and was staring at Marcus like he'd hung the moon. "Please," Emma whispered. "Don't make me go somewhere else." "Not again." Something shifted in the employee's expression. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she saw something in Marcus that reminded her of someone decent. Or maybe, just maybe, she understood that sometimes the system fails, and sometimes a stranger's. Kindness is the only thing standing between a child and complete despair. "I'm going to need you to fill out some forms," she finally said. "And I'm documenting that you showed identification. But, sir, if this isn't legitimate, there will be serious consequences." "I understand," Marcus said, his voice barely steady. He missed his flight to Boston. Missed the interview that could have changed his life. Instead, he sat in that airport office for 2 more hours, filling out paperwork with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, while Emma fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. By the time they finally released her to him, night had fallen over Seattle. Marcus stood in the terminal holding the hand of a little girl he'd met 4 hours ago, with absolutely no plan and no idea what happened next. "Are you really my uncle?" Emma asked quietly as they walked toward the exit. Marcus stopped. He knelt down and looked her straight in the eyes. Because she deserved at least that much honesty. "No," he said gently. "I'm not your uncle, Emma. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away." He expected tears, anger, fear. Instead, Emma threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. "Can I stay with you anyway?" she whispered. "Just for tonight?" That night turned into a week while Marcus frantically contacted every agency he could find, trying to locate Emma's actual placement. The week turned into a month of emergency foster certification, of caseworkers and home visits and endless paperwork. His tiny apartment became filled with secondhand toys and children's books. His carefully structured life became chaos, and somewhere in that chaos, something shifted. Emma's nightmares grew less frequent. Her smiles came easier. She started calling him Marcus. Then Mark, then one morning at breakfast. Sleepily, she called him Dad. He didn't correct her. The adoption took 18 months to finalize. 18 months of court dates and evaluations, of proving he was stable enough, responsible enough, committed enough. 18 months of Emma doing her homework at his kitchen table while he worked 2 jobs to afford a bigger apartment. 18 months of becoming a family. On the day the judge signed the final papers, Marcus stood in that courtroom with Emma's hand in his, and he thought about the man he'd been in that airport terminal, the man who almost walked away, the man who pretended for 5 minutes to be someone's uncle and found himself becoming someone's father. "Any words for the court?" the judge asked, smiling. Marcus looked down at Emma, who beamed up at him with missing front teeth and absolutely zero doubt that she was exactly where she belonged. "Just thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for letting me keep her." The judge's smile widened. "Mr. Hayes, I think you've got that backwards. Thank you for not walking away." That night, in their apartment that actually felt like home now, Emma crawled into his lap during their bedtime reading ritual. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you remember that day at the airport?" "Every single detail." "I was so scared. But then you came and I knew everything would be okay." She paused, then looked up at him with those serious brown eyes. "Why did you stop?" "Nobody else stopped." Marcus thought about that question for a long moment, remembering the weight of his own childhood loneliness, the people who had walked past him when he needed someone most. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "the most important thing we can do is just refuse to walk away from someone who needs us, even if it's scary, even if it changes everything." Emma nodded like this made perfect sense, then went back to her book, and Marcus sat there in the gentle lamplight, holding his daughter close, marveling at how 5 minutes of pretending had given him something real he never knew he needed. A family, a purpose, a chance to be the person who stayed